Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Shamatha Practice, led by Glen Svensson. The link for last week's video and slides, and also the handout, is in the chat box, the link to that. It also includes the color diagram for Shamatha, which I apologize for not including before. It's all in the chat. Glen, thank you for teaching us. Please start when you're ready.
Sunny, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay, I'm putting it in now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Should be there now.
Got it. Yes, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. So that also includes the color diagram of the Shamatha. So there are 3 handouts now.
I think it's time to start. Well, I'd like to then welcome everyone back to this 4th session of this Shamatha practice program, where we are developing our mindfulness. And in this session, we'll be looking at the mindfulness of breathing practice, focusing at the entrance of the nostrils. This is the 4th of 6 sessions in this program. We began with an introduction to Shamatha in the first session. In the last 2 sessions, we looked at the 2 variations of mindfulness of breathing, the full body breath practice, and then last week, the focusing in the area of the abdomen, and this week focusing at the nostrils. And then next week, we'll be looking at how to use the Shavasana posture for meditation, particularly emphasizing relaxation. And in the 6th and last session, we'll be looking at how to integrate this Shamatha practice into daily life. Again, the recommended reading for this program is Attention Revolution from Alan Wallace, an excellent book on this Shamatha practice. Let's have a look at what we'll be covering in this session. We'll begin with practice, mindfulness of breathing, the one we did last week, focusing on the area of the abdomen. Then we'll do a short review of some of the main points in the earlier sessions. And then I'd like to look at these 2 imbalances of laxity and excitation in a little bit more detail, in particular, how to remedy them effectively. And then we'll be looking at this week's practice, the mindfulness of breathing, focusing at the entrance of nostrils. We'll do a guided meditation on that. And then we'll continue our discussion on the stages of progress in this practice using this 9-stage model in this color diagram. We'll complete stages 5 through 9. We did 1 to 4 last week, and then time for question answer at the end of the session. But let's begin with this meditation, the mindfulness of breathing, focusing on the area of the abdomen. And so remember, the object in this practice is the tactile sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. Maintaining a basis of relaxation. And here in this practice, we are enhancing stability of attention on that basis. And what you might like to experiment with in this meditation session is doing this balancing on each breath, because we generally tend to either get caught up in tension, agitation, distraction, or when we're relaxed, we fall into dullness. So to balance the mind, to be completely relaxed, yet at the same time very alert and focused, then what we can do, you can experiment with this, is that on each out breath, relax and release any tightness or tension. And then on the in breath, arouse and sharpen the focus. And so that way we can balance the mind, be relaxed and alert at the same time. And then also last week, we introduced the idea of counting the breath as a way to help stabilize the attention. Remember, this is not part of the standard practice. It's a short-term strategy that you can introduce if you find yourself heavily distracted and you find it helpful to stabilize your attention. So in any time during this meditation, if you find yourself distracted a lot, then you might like to experiment with a little bit of counting or even noting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. That's the practice. Let's do that practice now. Find a nice, comfortable posture. Let's begin. Allowing your awareness to descend into the body. And simply becoming aware of sensations throughout the body. And using the out breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And bringing your awareness to the area of your face and soften and relax all the muscles in the face. Mouth and jaw, soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. And in this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. Simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And then preparing the mind. Letting go of all activities of the mind. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. To come to rest in the present moment. Resting in that stillness. And then setting a positive motivation for attending this session. And try to make your motivation as expansive as possible. And now bring your attention to the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Focusing on the tactile sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. And maintaining a basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And to help balance the mind, using the out breath as an opportunity to relax and release any tightness or tension, and using the in breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh the focus, to sharpen your focus on the breath. And if you're finding that you're constantly getting distracted from the breath, then you might like to experiment with counting or noting the breath to see if it helps to stabilize your attention. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Let's start with a short review of some of the main points from the earlier sessions. In this Shamatha program, we're looking at some various aspects of Shamatha training. The prerequisites for Shamatha training, in other words, how to set up our life in such a way to support this training, we'll be looking at in the 6th and last session. In terms of the actual practice, the actual meditation practice, we looked at how to prepare body, speech, and mind in session 1. We also looked at what qualities to cultivate in this practice in session 1. And in session 2, we looked at what objects to focus on, what tools do we use in this practice, and then in session 3, what faults can arise in this practice and how do we overcome them. And then also we'll be looking at in session 6, how to integrate this practice into daily life. In terms of the stages of progress in this practice, we're using this classic 9-stage model we see in this color diagram and the black and white diagram as well that you have. We started to look at that, the first 4 stages in that model last session. In this session, we were looking at stages 5 through 9, and then in next session, we'll be looking at the actual goal, the result of Shamatha. Again, in terms of preparation, it's important that we prepare well at the beginning of every meditation, putting the body into a relaxed state, good posture, keeping as still as possible, and then simply allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And in terms of the mind, also like the body, setting the mind into a very relaxed, still state with clarity in the present moment. The qualities that we cultivate in this Shamatha practice, we saw there that in addition to the 2 qualities normally described in the text, the qualities of stability and clarity, we added that 3rd quality of relaxation that you often don't see so much in the meditation texts, something we need to really pay attention to in the modern world, because we tend to, due to our lifestyle, bring a lot of agitation and tension into this practice, and we try and push very hard in this practice, and we have all sorts of problems. So the very first thing we need to do in this practice is relax, to learn to relax the body and mind. And then once we've sunk those deep roots of relaxation, then we can support a stronger trunk of stability. And the stronger the trunk of stability, the higher the branches and leaves of clarity can grow. In terms of objects, we saw there that, particularly based on this quote from a Sangha from the 4th century, that for many of us in the modern world who have a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, then probably the best object to use in the Shamatha practice, at least initially, is the breath, because it helps us to get out of the obsessive compulsive thinking mind into the body and get out of the past and future into the present moment. And relatively speaking, relative to some of the other objects, a bit easier to focus on. And in this program, therefore, we're looking at 3 variations of this mindfulness breathing practice. The full body practice we did, very good for relaxation. Last week, focusing on the area of the abdomen, good for enhancing stability of attention. And in this session, we'll be looking at the focusing at the entrance of the nostrils, very good for improving clarity of attention. But we did mention a couple of other objects that can be very suitable for us in the modern world. One was to observe the mind, or in other words, simply to observe our thoughts and emotions and so forth. And if we develop that ability to do that, we can really become the masters of our mind instead of being the slaves of our mind, instead of being tormented and overwhelmed by our thoughts, emotions, and memories. Another practice that is very suitable for us in the modern world is awareness, simply resting in the experience of awareness itself. And this is particularly very useful for helping us to, as a bridge into Vipassana practice, to wisdom practice, but also sometimes recommended to use a mental image of a Buddha. Many people find that very challenging, but it would be a very good preparation for Tantra practice later if we gain the ability to visualize well Buddhas and deities and so forth. And then in terms of tools, we saw that the 2 tools we used, mindfulness and introspection, here in that diagram, symbolized, the mindfulness is symbolized by the rope, tying our mind with a rope of mindfulness to the object. And then the hook of introspection literally to hook our mind back when we notice we've become dull or distracted. And here we have a quote from great 16th century Tibetan master, Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen, who says, in brief, accomplishing faultless concentration does not go beyond the manner of sustaining mindfulness and introspection. Furthermore, mindfulness is principle, and if this is present, then introspection, which is said to be the result of mindfulness, comes naturally. So of the two tools, mindfulness is principle, meaning if we simply improve, develop, cultivate mindfulness, strengthen mindfulness, then our ability to introspect will get naturally better, will improve as well. So these are the two tools, main tools we use in this practice. And then we saw that we can have these 5 faults that we need to overcome with the 8 antidotes. And if we can, then we can move along these 9 stages to shamatha. And we saw here that the first fault was laziness. And we saw there are 4 antidotes to laziness. That initially, the initial antidote to laziness is faith. And here we saw that quote from Tsongkhapa, the great 14th century Tibetan master, the founder of the Geluk school of Tibetan Buddhism. And he says, if you cannot stop the laziness of being disinclined to cultivate concentration and of enjoying things that are not conducive to it, from the outset, you will not gain entry into concentration. Meaning that we often tend to be lazy when it comes to this practice because we don't really appreciate the benefits of this practice. And rather we think that if we, chase after all those sensory pleasures out there, that's going to make us happy. So we put all of our time and energy there, and we're very lazy when it comes to doing this practice. But if we can really reflect on the benefits of this practice, then we'll have a lot of faith in the practice. And that will lead to aspiration. We'll want to do the practice. And then that will lead to more enthusiasm and effort into the practice. And then eventually this pliancy, this flexibility of serviceability of body and mind, which we'll describe in a little bit more detail in next week's session. The second fault was forgetfulness, forgetting the object or forgetting the instructions. Antidote, mindfulness. Remember the instructions, remember the object, hold the object. And then we saw that the third fault was this twin pair, these twin imbalances of laxity and excitation. And the antidote to that is introspection. So introspection is quality control, noticing if our mind is becoming dull or distracted. And so here, this is what Tsongkhapa is saying, is that it is not enough just to have an understanding of laxity and excitation. You have to be able to develop introspection that accurately detects whether laxity and excitation is present during meditation. So this is really the antidote, is to notice if we're becoming dull or distracted. But then the fourth fault is non-application, meaning that even though if we notice the dullness or distraction or laxity and excitation, and we don't do anything about it, that's a fault. And again, here Tsongkhapa says that. He says, if you make no effort to stop laxity and excitation as soon as they arise, your complacency or failure to apply yourself constitutes an extremely serious problem for your concentration. To remedy a failure to apply yourself to the elimination of laxity and excitation, cultivate the intention called application or effort, meaning as soon as you notice some laxity or excitation, then make some effort or apply yourself to remedy it. And how to remedy it, we see here we've introduced those couple of key words to help us to know what to do, how to remedy laxity and excitation should they arise. So for laxity, meaning the mind is sinking, then often the main reason for that is we've lost interest in the practice. So the first thing to do is refresh our interest in the practice, then restore our attention on the object, and then retain that ongoing flow of mindfulness. And for excitation or distraction, then how to remedy that is first, relax. If our mind is agitated, tense, or distracted, relax body and mind. Then release the distraction and very gently return to the object. Reapply mindfulness to the object without clamping down more forcefully. But then we saw there was one more fault of over-application. And this can really can become a problem once we get into the higher stages of shamatha. And that is where we are actually focusing well on the object, but we're unnecessarily adjusting our focus. So that's a fault. So the antidote there is equanimity. And here equanimity means balance. Mind is already balanced, leave it as it is. So I'd like to now look at laxity and excitation a little bit more detail, and particularly in how to remedy it in terms of a number of different strategies we can use to remedy both laxity and excitation. And so here we saw in that color diagram that the elephant is symbolizing the mind, and the black color of the elephant is symbolizing this laxity or sinking of the mind. And here Tsongkhapa defines laxity. He says, laxity means that your mind's way of apprehending the object of meditation is slack, and it does not apprehend the object with much vividness or firmness. So the mind is sinking. And so here we saw we can talk about 3 levels of laxity. Very coarse level of laxity, where your mind is sinking a lot, is it sinks so much that you're mostly disengaging from the object due to a lack of clarity or vividness. Of course, extremely coarse laxity is where it sinks so much we even fall asleep in meditation. But one step before that is the mind is sinking so that we're barely noticing the object at all. A more medium level of laxity is where the object is appearing, but there's not much vividness or clarity. There's the object's there, but it's not very clear. Whereas a subtle level of laxity is where the object is actually appearing vividly or clearly, but our attention is slightly slack. We need to sharpen our attention a little bit. And so these are the levels of laxity, the more and more subtle levels that we are slowly overcoming as we move along these 9 stages to shamatha. And so we saw in the first 4 stages that we're really dealing with a lot of coarse laxity. The mind is sinking quite a lot. And then over the middling and higher stages, we move on to eliminating medium and even the subtlest level of laxity. But here we can talk about a number of strategies of how to remedy laxity. And the first line approach is if we just have some slight laxity, mind is sinking a little bit, then as Tsongkhapa says, tighten your apprehension of the object and continue meditating. So if you notice your mind is sinking, then particularly on the in-breath, that's a good opportunity to arouse and refresh and sharpen our focus. Sharpen, but not with tension. So even though here he says tighten your apprehension, it doesn't mean get tense. Tighten means just sharpen, pay closer attention to the object. Now, if that's not really working, that you're still sinking quite a lot, even if you're trying to sharpen your focus, particularly on each in-breath, and you're still sinking, probably is because you've lost interest in the practice. So then the second strategy, where we have much stronger laxity, is then we need to uplift the mind. And so here Shanti Deva says we need to inspire yourself by cultivating delight. So then you shift from the object and then you just momentarily reflect, for example, on the fact that we have this wonderful opportunity to do this practice. It's going to bring us enormous benefits. And so therefore have a lot of delight at being able to do this practice, and how this practice will really bring us a lot of benefit, to uplift the mind, to get interested in the practice again. Now, that's the backup strategy. But let's say that's not even working. If it really even trying to do that, we're still sinking a lot. Then Tsongkhapa says you need to suspend your cultivation of concentration, means stop your meditation, clear away laxity, and then resume your meditation. And he says, in this regard, a Sangha suggests such activities as going for a walk and washing your face with water. So, to invigorate the body a little bit if you're really sinking a lot, and even trying to inspire the mind is not working. So these are sort of 3 strategies to use in overcoming laxity. So first line strategy, just sharpen the focus. That's not really working. Then inspire them ourselves. If that's not even working, then we need eventually to stop the meditation and overcome that laxity and come back to the meditation. And here Tsongkhapa says, gives some more advice. He says, here is the most important remedy for stopping laxity. When you reflect on the benefits of bodhicitta and the great significance of attaining leisure, it should have a bracing effect on your mind, meaning uplifting the mind. This depends on your having had experience with discerning analytical meditation on these beneficial topics. So here he's talking about bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment, for the welfare of others. And the great significance of attaining leisure is to reflect on our precious human life, that we've got this wonderful opportunity to make our life meaningful, to strive for genuine happiness. And this is a key practice for that. And so should have an uplifting, a bracing effect on our mind. But he says that if we haven't earlier reflected on these points deeply, then simply bringing them to mind here probably won't have any effect, because it'll just be intellectual. It won't be experiential. And so here he's really highlighting the importance of the preliminary practices, the foundation practices that provide us an effective basis for all the main practices, including shamatha, vipassana, compassion, and so forth. And we'll look at these in more detail in session 6. Excitation now. So monkey is symbolizing discursive thought in general. The black color is symbolizing this excitation. And here Tsongkhapa says, what is excitation? It is an unquiet state of mind considered a derivative of attachment, which pursues pleasant objects and acts as a impediment to shamatha. So we're pulled away by so-called sense pleasures. And so we have also here 3 levels of excitation. Very coarse excitation is where we completely disengage or completely distracted from the meditative object. Medium excitation is where we start to get pulled away and we're mainly focusing on something else, but a little bit in the corner of our mind, we're still holding the object. Whereas subtle excitation is where we're mainly focusing on the object, but in a little bit in the background of our mind, we're starting to get pulled a little bit by some other distractions. So let's have a look at how to remedy excitation. Again, these 3 strategies similar to laxity. So again, if excitation is slight, then Tsongkhapa says, draw in the scattered attention and fix your attention upon the object of meditation. So if you get distracted, first line approach, relax, release, return. Just keep coming back to the object, keep coming back to the object. If you find that you're just constantly getting distracted all the time, then again, probably because we're really caught up in these sensory distractions. So then Shantideva again says, then calm the mind by bringing impermanence to mind. That means bring the mind down by bringing impermanence to mind. Here, impermanence can either be subtle impermanence by realizing that the things we're chasing after are changing moment by moment. They're never going to give us any lasting, genuine happiness. To let go of that. Or coarse impermanence, to understand that this precious opportunity we have to make our life meaningful is not going to last forever. So let's not waste it. So bring the mind down from this agitated, excited state of mind. If that's not even working, then as before, Tsongkhapa says we need to stop the meditation and really work on overcoming that excitation. So he says, it is crucial that you relax the meditation for a while and cultivate a sense of disenchantment, rather than attempting to pull in your mind and direct it back to the object of meditation every time it becomes distracted. So a sense of disenchantment is because we're really caught up in chasing after sense pleasures. And so we really need to work on that habit. And that's what a sense of disenchantment means, to really then deeply reflect on the fact that these things out there, these sensory pleasures, they're never really going to satisfy us and fulfill us. And so to become disenchanted with chasing after those sensory pleasures. And so this is really to reflect on the nature of our existence. And so here, again, the importance of the preliminary practices. As we saw earlier, that here we can talk about some common preliminary practices in common to all traditions. And we'll look at these in some detail in the 6th session, what's called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. The first one is to reflect on the precious human life that we have, full of opportunities. The second one there is to reflect on the fact that it's not going to last forever, and let's take advantage of it now. The third one is all about reflecting on the causality of our actions and thereby adopting an ethical lifestyle. But here, what he's talking about, sense of disenchantment, is really the 4th one, to understand that there's nothing out there that is the source of our genuine happiness, to really get disenchanted with chasing after sensory pleasures. And if we can do that, then we can avoid this constant excitation, chasing after these sensory distractions. And this is what Tsongkhapa is saying here. So we'll look at a little at these preliminary practices in a little bit more detail in the 6th session in this program. So let's now go to the meditation for this session. So we're now going to focus on the mindfulness of breathing at the entrance of the nostrils. So the object here is the tactile sensations at the entrance of the nostrils during the in and out flow of the breath. So when it says entrance of the nostrils, you can either focus at the actual entrance of the nostrils or this little area above the upper lip, wherever you find more easy. So anywhere in this area here, you can focus. And we're focusing on the sensations of the breath there. So we're not doing so we're using bare attention, directly observing those tactile sensations. So we're not imagining the breath coming in and going down, coming up and going out, or visualizing it. We're not visually looking at the nose or anything like that. We're just focusing on the actual sensations here. Now, because we're bringing the attention up and it's a much smaller area of focus, then it's very helpful for improving clarity of attention. But here we need to be careful. Because it's a little bit more difficult to focus here, then there can be this tendency to tense. So we need to make sure that we're not tensing in the focus. So keep a close eye on the any sensations here, any tension across the forehead, any tension around the eyes, and on each out breath, just relaxing that tension, relaxing. And because also it's maybe a bit difficult to focus here, then there can be a tendency to force the breath to pick up sensation. So we don't want to do that either. So just allow the breathing flow naturally and pay closer attention here. Like the breath practice at the abdomen, if in this practice you find yourself getting constantly distracted and you find it helpful, you can use counting or noting the breath to help stabilize the attention. Let's do that practice now. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. A vigilant posture is to keep the back nice and straight. And then at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And then having established a good posture, keeping the body as still as possible, avoiding any unnecessary movement. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And setting the mind in a state of relaxation, stillness, and clarity. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. And then from that stillness, start to become aware of the sensations of the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. Noticing the sensations of the breath as it moves across this area during the in and out flow of the breath. Maintaining the basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind. Keeping all the muscles in the face soft and relaxed. All the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly, not trying to control or force the breath in any way. And if you're finding that you're constantly getting distracted from the breath, then if you find it helpful, you might like to introduce some counting or noting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Let's now go back to this 9-stage model describing the stages of progress in the shamatha practice that we began last week. And we saw here that we can move through these 9 stages by relying on those 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults. And this is accomplished through the 6 powers and the 4 mental engagements. And so here we have these 9 stages from directed attention up to attentional balance. We looked at the first 4 stages last week. And so we'll look at stages 5 through 9 this week. And then the goal of shamatha will be next week. 6 powers, remember, were the power we use to move to the next stages of the practice. So we saw there that first we need to hear about the instructions to get to stage 1. And then to get to stage 2, we think about the practice more and get more enthusiastic and understand it better. And then we saw that through improving our mindfulness, then we can move on to stages 3 and 4. And what we'll see now is that then through our ability to introspect better and better and better, we can go deeper into the practice, going through to stages 5 and 6. And then the enthusiasm from a practice will then propel us through stages 7 and 8. And then through the power of complete familiarity with the practice will enable us to achieve stage 9. And we saw there in terms of mental engagement, that focused mental engagement meant we need to continually focus on the object because most of the time we're distracted. So we saw that at stages 1 and 2, we have this focused mental engagement because we're completely distracted from the object. Whereas already in stages 3 and 4, we're mostly on the object and we're every now and again interrupted by various degrees of laxity and excitation. And that will go through to stages 7. And then we'll see that by stage 8, that we're no longer interrupted by any laxity excitation. So we have an uninterrupted engagement at stage 8. And then that whole process becomes completely effortless, spontaneous. This is stage 9. So let's now go through those last 5 stages, but let's just briefly first go through the first 4 stages. So remember again at stage 1, directed attention, we have the meditator, rope of mindfulness left hand, the hook of introspection in the right hand. Elephant is the mind. The fact that it is black is symbolizing laxity or dullness. The monkey is discursive thought in general. Black color is this excitation. And we see here at stage 1, the elephant and monkey are running wildly ahead of the meditator. So what we notice at stage 1 is that we can hardly focus on the object. In fact, we achieve stage 1 if we're simply able to focus on the object for a couple of seconds. And we do that through the power of learning the instructions or hearing. But the problems that persist at this stage 1 is there's no attentional continuity on the object, meaning we're distracted most of the time. We're hardly on the object, just a couple of seconds, and then we tend to be distracted for long periods of time. So the main imbalance here is coarse excitation, where we're completely distracted from the object, and the mental engagement is focused. We have to keep focusing the mind on the object. If we continue to practice and reflect about the practice, we can get around the corner to stage 2, go a little bit further in the practice. Stage 2 was continuous attention. Elephant, monkey not running so fast anymore. And also there's a bit of white on the top of the head of the elephant. So what we notice here at stage 2 is our mind starts to settle down a little bit. And we can hold the object for a little longer period, maybe up to a minute or 2, but we still have long periods of distraction. So we're still more off the object than on the object. So again, coarse excitation, complete distraction, and we still have to keep focusing on the object because we're mainly distracted. But then if we keep practicing and improve our mindfulness, then through the power of mindfulness, that enables us to go on to stages 3 and 4. So in stage 3, resurgent attention, now mindfulness is getting a lot better. We see the rope of mindfulness tied to the elephant of the mind. And so now we can focus on the object longer periods of the time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And now if we get distracted, we quickly recognize that and quickly come back to the object, symbolized by the elephant turning head backwards, quickly come back to the object. But now we have the rabbit in the picture, subtle laxity, subtle dullness. Now we need to start from stages 3, 4, 5, and 6. We now need to start to pick up more and more subtle levels of laxity, but also more subtle levels of excitation. And so now, though, the mental engagement is what's called interrupted, because we're mainly on the object now. Every now and again, we're interrupted by laxity and excitation. But we still have coarse excitation. We still do get distracted for completely distracted for brief periods of time. But now at stage 4, and then at stage 4, mindfulness is getting better. So now at stage 4, close attention, we can hold the object the entire session without ever completely losing the object. So that's what we achieve. Now, what problems persist here is that because we can hold the object the entire session, complacency could come into the practice, because we think, well, you know, I can focus quite well. I think I must be pretty close to shamatha already. And so we can get a little bit complacent about practice, but there's still a lot of work to do. Now the imbalance is coarse excitation gone. Now we still have quite coarse laxity, quite heavy sinking, and a medium degree of excitation. Where our mind is pulled away mainly to a distraction, but we're still holding on to the object a little bit. So that's still there at stage 4. That's where we left off. Now, to get to stages 5 and 6, that bend in the road, we get to higher levels by better introspection, the power of introspection. Our quality control is getting better and better and better, picking up more and more subtle levels of laxity and excitation. And so stage 5 is called tamed attention. Now, what we achieve is we have a lot of satisfaction in samadhi, a lot of satisfaction in this practice, because we're really getting a lot of progress now. What problems persist, though, is that there's still some resistance to the training. So even though we get a lot of satisfaction, we still have a little bit of resistance to the training. But now we've got rid of the heaviest level of laxity. We have medium laxity, where the object's there, but not very clear. And so mental engagement is interrupted again. But now we see that this hook of introspection is more prominent. I want to talk a little bit more about that now. But before I do, I want to briefly talk about the monkey in the tree there. We see top left, monkey in the tree holding some fruit. And there's a long description underneath that. And in your black and white handout, that is number 19. And if we look on the back, number 19 says the following: since virtuous thoughts are an interruption at the time of shamatha meditation, it is necessary to stop them. At other times, it is not necessary. So what this means is that particularly when we get to these middling stages, our mind is getting much more stable, more clear. So what's happening is that we're creating a space for insights and intuition to surface more readily. Now our mind is agitated and disturbed, and we're really suffocating deeper levels of our mind. There's not much space for any insights or intuition to arise. But here, by the middling stages, that's going to start to happen more and more. So you may find in the middle of the meditation, some great idea comes up, some virtuous thought comes up. But what this monkey in the tree is saying here, this description, is this is not the time to entertain those thoughts, no matter how virtuous, no matter how great an idea, whatever the insight. Just know, okay, that's a great idea. I'll attend to that after the meditation, and then go back to the object. So this is what the monkey in the tree is saying. So we see stages 5 and 6 here. Now, introspection is getting better and better. We're starting to pick up more and more subtle degrees of laxity and excitation. And so here it's all about balancing the mind. And often the analogy used here is the analogy of a guitar string. That if a guitar string is too tight or too loose, it doesn't play well. Likewise, if our mind is too tight or too loose, it doesn't focus well. If our mind is too tight, it starts to get agitated. If our mind is too loose, it starts to sink into laxity or dullness. So it's about fine-tuning that focus. And we see this here from a quote from, again, Panchen Losang Chiki Gyaltsen. And he says, If your focus is too tight and you think that excitation is arising, relax it a little. If your focus is too loose and you think that laxity is arising, tighten it a little. By finding a balance between the two, between being too tight or too loose, the mind is drawn away from the movement of thoughts. But then he gives a warning. He says, however, it is necessary to be cautious of laxity whenever there is a factor of stillness, meaning that when our mind becomes quiet and still, very much a danger, then we just sink into dullness. And here also is a quote from a great Indian master, Chandra Goman, who says, if I rely upon exertion, excitation will arise. And if I give it up, laxity will occur. Since it is difficult to find an appropriate balance, what should I do with my agitated mind? What he's saying there is that even for seasoned meditators, they're faced with this challenge of being too tight, too loose. And so it's something that comes through experience, like fine-tuning a guitar, that the more we do it, the more better we become at fine-tuning the guitar string. Similarly here, the more we engage in this balancing, the better and better we get at balancing the mind, and the further and further we can go in these 9 stages. And so also here, Tsongkhapa says something similar. He says, in summary, withdraw your mind from scattering in excitation, inwardly fixing it upon the object of meditation, and seek stability. Each time stability occurs, take great precautions against laxity and bring forth a vivid intensity. You will achieve a flawless concentration by alternating between these two. So again, between relaxing and between the two, being too tight and too loose. So we find the balance in the middle, and that's where we find this flawless concentration. Let's go to the next stage. So stage 6 now, again, introspection is getting much better. And so now we've got rid of medium excitation. Now we just have subtle excitation. What we achieve at stage 6 is, stage 5, we still had some resistance to the training. Now that's gone. We have no resistance to training at all. But now what problems persist here, it says, desire, depression, lethargy, drowsiness. So these seem like pretty heavy problems. So why are they appearing here at this elevated stage, stage 6? And that's because due to going deeper into the practice, now we're really starting to dredge the depths of our mind that previously we've had either consciously, unconsciously sort of suppressed a little bit. Now a lot of stuff is coming up in the mind, really dredging the mind. But now at stage 6, these things like desire, depression, lethargy, drowsiness won't overwhelm us as they would have done at the beginning, but they'll still come up. A lot of this strong stuff comes up, and we have to go through that here at stage 6. The imbalances now is medium laxity, not very clear still, subtle excitation, where now we're mainly focusing on the object, a little bit of background noise going on, and we're still interrupted by those degrees of laxity, excitation. Now, through the power of enthusiasm, we move on to stages 7 and 8. And so here we see at stage 7, now the rabbit is gone. There's hardly any black left on the back of the elephant. And basically we're saying more or less goodbye to the monkey. He looks very passive there, the monkey. And so here, this is number 24 on the other chart. So if we look on the back there, number 24 says, at this stage, it is difficult for subtle laxity or excitation to arise. And even if they do arise a little, they're immediately eliminated with the slightest effort. So therefore here, if some subtlest laxity excitation arises, easily dispel. What problems persist though is they're still there, but we can eliminate them very quickly. And our engagement is interrupted by those very subtle levels of laxity and excitation. But then through power of enthusiasm, we continue to practice and we move on to stage 8. And now at stage 8, called single point attention, the monkey is gone, no black on the elephant. Now we don't even have a single hint of subtle laxity, subtle excitation. So that's what we achieve. We can meditate for long periods of time without any hint of excitation or laxity. Problems persist is that we still need a little bit of effort to ward those off. So we still need a little bit of effort in the practice. And the imbalances that even though there's no manifest excitation or laxity, they're still there at a sort of dormant level. Now the mental engagement is uninterrupted. We're not interrupted by any level of laxity or excitation for a long period of time. Even for maybe 2 or 3 hours, we can meditate in this state, no problems. And then through the power of familiarity in this practice, we move to stage 9, called attentional balance. Now it becomes effortless, spontaneous. We can flow in and out of meditation effortlessly and spontaneously through the power of extreme familiarity with this practice. What problems persist, though, is if we were, for some reason, to stop the practice here at stage 9, then slowly over time, those imbalances would start to come back. So they're still there, those imbalances potentially if we were to stop the practice. And now the mental engagement is completely effortless, it's spontaneous. We can flow in and out of meditation. We can be in this effortless state, flawless concentration for up to at least 4 hours at a time, no problems at all. But still we haven't achieved shamatha. The transition from stage 9 to shamatha, and then what shamatha will bring us and how we use that later, that's something we're going to look at in next week's session. So that's all I wanted to cover in the 9 stages today. And so now we have time for question answer. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and Sunny will read them out. So is there any questions?
Okay. Let's see. Question, is it helpful to attend guided meditations? They usually have a specific subject like shamatha, like bodhicitta. So guided meditations are not strictly, shamatha training. So is it helpful to attend guided meditations?
Is the question asking, is it helpful to listen to guided meditations when you're doing the practice or to learn them? I'm not sure what the question is.
It's to listen. To attend.
Two of them, yeah. So meditations, we can talk about many types of meditations, and there are many ways of classifying meditations. One classification that's often used, particularly in this context, is we can divide all meditations into 2 classes, either stabilizing meditation or analytical meditation. Stabilizing meditation is, as the name suggests, meditation to stabilize the mind. So that is this shamatha practice. So shamatha practice is stabilizing meditation. We're simply cultivating a calm, clear, stable, focused mind. Whereas analytical meditation is then where we investigate. And analytical meditations can be many. They can be wisdom type practices, vipassana practices, where we're investigating to gain insights into reality. They can be compassion, loving kindness meditations, where we investigate to cultivate these positive qualities of loving kindness and compassion. And so in these analytical meditations, often they have a number of steps that we go through in the practice. And so what it can be helpful is when we're initially learning them is to listen to guided meditations a number of times to become familiar with the steps in the practice. Once we're familiar with the steps in the practice, then it would be helpful not to keep listening, but rather just do the practice ourselves. Because if we keep listening simply to guided meditations, what you'll probably find is over time, you'll start to become a bit lazy. You'll just switch the guided meditation on. You won't really be listening so much, and you won't probably doing the practice so much. And so we can get a bit lazy. So we, therefore, after we've learned the practice well, let go of those guided meditations and just do the practice ourselves. And this can apply to shamatha meditation as well. When we're learning shamatha meditation, such as these or other shamatha practices, we can listen to the guided meditations a number of times until we become familiar with the practice, and then let go of that and just do the practice ourselves. But then what can be useful is after some time, maybe some weeks or months later, is to go back and listen to the guided meditation again, because in the interim, if we're just doing the practice ourselves, we may forget some steps, or we may introduce some steps that are not quite correct, that weren't in the original practice. And so our practice may deviate off onto a tangent. And so then after some months to listen to the guided meditation again, just to make sure that we're still on track and we're not doing something incorrect or added something that shouldn't be there. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. Linda Sari asks, could you address the problem of diluted doubt that precludes the application of antidotes? Even though I know what the antidotes are, and I also remember them during meditation when faults arise, but diluted doubt convinces the mind that it doesn't really matter.
Yes. I think we saw that maybe in a quote from Tsongkhapa, that in terms of application is that he says that, you know, if we've noticed there's laxity or excitation arising and we don't do anything about it, we don't fix that's a great problem, and that will become an impediment to shamatha. And that is true, is that if we notice laxity or excitation and we allow them to continue, then actually we're increasing the very imbalances that we're trying to decrease. And so we need to be, one, aware that allowing them to continue is going to be an impediment to practice, and not think, oh, it's just a little bit of dullness, that's okay, I'll just continue like that. Or there's a little bit of stuff going on there, that's okay, I'm sort of still on the object, but I'll just sort of entertain those thoughts in the back of my mind, to let go of that idea, because if we continue with that idea, then we'll get stuck, we won't progress. So that's one point. And the other point, which Tsongkhapa also mentioned we saw quotes from Tsongkhapa here, and we'll look at in a little bit more detail in session 6, is the importance of these preliminary practices, particularly this precious human life, impermanence, and this disenchantment with chasing after sense pleasures, these common preliminary practices. And if we don't engage in those practices, then you'll find that even though these imbalances of laxity and excitation arise, and you may want to eliminate them, still you'll still be a strong pull towards those distractions, because we're still sort of having a lot of craving towards those attachments, because we're still sort of looking out there for happiness. And so unless we really reduce that craving and attachment through doing these preliminary practices, then you'll find it'll be a struggle in overcoming this laxity and excitation, or even wanting to overcome these imbalances. And so therefore, that's what we mentioned briefly in this session, the importance of these preliminary practices, and not just to sort of give them lip service. You know, often people look at this and they go, oh, preliminary practices, oh, that's something I'm just doing a little bit as a beginner, tick, 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 done, let's get on to the shamatha. If that's our attitude, then we're going to have problems in shamatha, because we haven't established a foundation through effectively engaging in these preliminary practices. So just to merely once or twice go, yeah, I've got a precious human life, I know that. Yeah, I'm not going to die. I could die anytime. Yes, tick, tick, I know that. Oh, yes, sensory pleasure is not going to satisfy me. Yes, tick, gone, done. If we have that attitude, then it's just intellectual. It's not experiential. And that intellectual knowledge won't really help us in our shamatha practice when we're caught up in laxity or excitation, because our experience will still, experientially, we'll be still holding on to those sensory pleasures as a source of our happiness. And so we need a counterforce for that. And that's where the preliminary practices come in. If we really put some effort into those preliminary practices and then make it experiential, then in shamatha, you'll find that the pull won't be so great for those sensory pleasures. And you'll find it a little bit easier. Well, one, you'll have less distraction coming up. And if it does, it'll be easier for you to let go of it and come back to the object in shamatha. So again, I can't overemphasize the importance of preliminary practices, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in session 6.
Okay. Lynn Carroll, I feel like I'm regressing in meditation. I experience more drowsiness, which is laxity, yes? Is this because I'm seeing my mind on deeper levels or something else? Could you please share your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first we saw back in stage 1 last week, one of the first signs of progress in this practice is simply noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. That's in terms of distraction. But similarly, just to notice also how our mind at other times is just dull and sinking. And we tend to oscillate between those two extremes in daily life. Either we're alert, tense, and agitated, or we're relaxed and sinking into dullness. And so again, with introspection, we'll just start to notice these different levels of laxity and excitation that have always been there, but really we haven't really noticed them so well because we haven't been paying attention. So yes, one of the things we will notice is a lot of these levels of laxity and excitation that we didn't really notice before, particularly once they get more and more subtle. Now we don't have our quality control. Even if we were to sit down and look, now we wouldn't be able to really pick up those more subtle levels of excitation or laxity because we don't have that ability. But as we improve our mindfulness and therefore our ability to introspect improves, we'll start to notice and pick up more and more subtle levels of laxity and excitation. That's one point. And the second point on this question is that in our modern world, you know, we tend to be very agitated and chaotic and busy and reacting to stimulus, and then often due to our lifestyle not getting enough sleep either, and then managing to get through the day by drinking more coffee and so forth. But then if we sit down quietly during the day and we relax the body, relax the mind, then the body's going, oh, thank you, finally. And then, of course, we collapse in a big heap because we haven't had enough sleep. And then we fall into laxity or dullness. So therefore, very important to make sure that we get enough quality sleep. Because otherwise, of course, when we relax the body and relax the mind, we're just going to get very sleepy and dull. And then the last point is, as we saw from Tsongkhapa, is that he said the most important remedy for laxity is to reflect on bodhicitta and the leisure and opportunity. In other words, to really reflect on the fact that we have this precious human life and we want to make it meaningful, and this shamatha practice is going to be an integral part of that. Because one of the main reasons we're falling into laxity or dullness is we've simply lost interest in the practice. Again, a little bit like, you know, if we're watching a program on TV at night, if we find it boring, of course we're going to get dull, drowsy, and sleepy. However, if we find that program completely interesting, then even if we're a little bit tired from the day, we're going to be completely focused on that program on TV because we're completely interested in it. And so therefore, again, preliminary practice is going to be helpful for this, to really uplift the mind and be very enthusiastic for this practice. If we're not enthusiastic about this practice, yes, we will fall into laxity, dullness, drowsiness, and even maybe fall asleep. So these are some points that can be very helpful in overcoming laxity in our practice. I think we've got time for at least one more question.
Okay. From Yvesha, at what stage during the practice should you no longer use an object for focus?
I didn't catch it. What stage should we do what, sorry?
Should you no longer use an object for focus?
For shamatha, if we're using an object such as the breath or the mind or a mental image, we use that all the way to shamatha. The other option is what's called the resting in awareness. That's sometimes called shamatha with no object. That's we're turning awareness in upon itself. So if we're using that practice, then we don't have an object, meaning an object other than itself. But in this practice, we're not simply, you know, using the breath for some time and then just letting go of the breath and just hanging out there, unless, of course, we are shifting from the breath practice to the resting in awareness. So that's valid. I mean, and that's an option that Alan Wallace also recommends, is that, you know, his recommendation or one recommendation is to start with the breath because it's easiest till stage 4. Then from stage 5 through to stage 8, shift to focusing on the mind. And then from stage 8 onwards, turn awareness in upon itself and know you're aware. So this, yes, we can do. Maybe one more question and then we'll stop.
Yes, from Pamela. Is it believed that we find more energy to develop the practice if we meditate in community as opposed to alone?
Yeah, very helpful as a beginner to have Sangha, spiritual community, because as a beginner, we tend to have quite strong habits and we tend to be very easily influenced by people and things around us. And so and sometimes it's like, you know, swimming against the current in a stream. If we're trying to meditate on our own, it's going to be extremely difficult. Therefore, we need help. So therefore, very helpful as a beginner to find like-minded people, get connected with them, meet together regularly, maybe have some once a week, have some group meditation to meditate together, to feel like you're not the only one against swimming against the current, so to speak. And so therefore to get help, and definitely meditating in a group can give some group energy as well. So yes, certainly to have some connection with some people, either physically or virtually now, particularly with the pandemic, and you can do a little bit of group meditation together. Yes, can be very, very helpful. Okay, I think we've run out of time there, so let's leave it there. And let's finish again by dedicating all of our efforts in this session using the Shantideva dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you. And so next week, session 5, we're going to look at the Shavasana posture, and we're going to do a meditation using Shavasana posture. So if possible, if you have nearby a bed or at least some sort of yoga mat or cushion on the floor where you can go into the Shavasana posture for the second meditation in next week's session, that would be helpful. And also we'll be looking at the actual goal of Shamatha in the next session and some of the effects of this Shamatha practice as well. So that's some of the topics for next week. So until next Tuesday, stay safe, stay well. See you next Tuesday. Bye now.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.